I'm really happy to be included on this panel today. As Saida said, I've been working with immigrants and refugees and international students, all adults, in the context of English language learning for a really long time, but I love what she said this morning and talking about that idea of cultural humility. That's my new favorite phrase. That I'm not an expert. We heard from the experts in the panel earlier today. So I just want to share some of my observations and some things I've been thinking about and learning, and some maybe practical tips for you. I always appreciate when I come to a conference that I get the big ideas, but I also get something to take back that I can use the very next day. So hopefully we'll do that today. The first thing I thought about with how language and literacy affect acculturation is that it's really impossible to look at in isolation. Right? It affects every other piece of this process, and it's woven so intricately that it's impossible to separate. If someone has the language skills to get what they need, their whole world opens up. And many students that we work with talk about the joy of becoming more independent. That's a word we've heard a lot today, as their English abilities improve. Not having to rely on somebody else, a stranger or a family member, to help translate the language to get what they need is incredibly empowering. There's a loss of privacy when another person has to be involved in sometimes personal or intimate interactions, or sometimes you have to give up on what you truly need or settle for something that's not exactly what you want, just because you don't have the language to express yourself fully. You know, think about simply ordering the thing off the menu that you recognize rather than the food you actually want to eat. Having the voice to advocate for yourself gives you some agency in your own life that you can't find anywhere else. And, you know, as important as the language itself is, the community that can form through language and common experience is equally as important. There's a lot of isolation that is rooted both in the lack of language skills as well as the inability to find entrance into the community, including the community of people from your own native country, like Biani said, are people who have had gone through this same process. And we really love to think of our school, ILI, right down the hill here, as a safe place where people from all over the world are sharing in this process of acculturation at whatever place they might be in that process. At our school, and the language instruction not only give the students the skills and the tools to be able to communicate, but it also helps them find the people with whom to communicate, those peers in a foreign land. And often finding those peers and nurturing those relationships is really a lifeline. It's really amazing to see the difference in students, sometimes within just a few weeks of starting English classes. They come to us, they're nervous, scared, stressed out, and that can play out in a lot of different ways, which I'll talk about in a minute. But then they start classes, and being with those peers that can relate to their experience and working towards this common goal of learning a new language and culture is amazing. And suddenly that nervous student is smiling and asking questions, and they seem almost like a different person, when it's obvious they're just feeling really more like himself or herself. And it takes a really long time, hundreds of hours of language instruction. Biani talked about, going from an intensive program to just a few hours a week is really hard. And I want to give a shout out to Dean's Beans Coffee right now. I don't know if you know them, but Dean himself had contacted us, and he saw this problem and talked to us, and he is generously giving a scholarship every single month to one of our immigrant or refugee students to participate in the full-time program, which is amazing. So seeing that, yes. Seeing that and doing something about it is huge. So we're really, really grateful to that. Going back to the fear and the stress that someone might be feeling as a non-native speaker, brings up one of the most important things that I try to keep in mind when working with our students, and something that has been said about 10 different times today, is do not make assumptions other than assuming a spirit of cooperation. I can't make any assumptions behind the intent, about the intent behind somebody's look or gesture or word choice, what I might perceive as, oh, that was really rude or not helpful at all, probably has nothing to do at all with our interaction. Like Saida said this morning, we have no idea. We are incompetent, really. The person may have had 10 such interactions like that day already, or is really exhausted from trying to speak English all day long. She may not be making eye contact with me because it's not culturally appropriate. Or a person who comes from a culture where bargaining is an everyday occurrence makes some Americans feel really uncomfortable, or we think they're being pushy, or their tone of voice seems aggressive because it lacks some of the cadence that we are used to hearing. Recently, the first interaction that I had with a new student from Pakistan had me feeling a little angry, and I could feel my stress level rising because he kept saying to me, you should call me when you have the paperwork done. You should sign this letter for me. I need my ID, and on. And I had to take a minute and a deep breath and remind myself that he was not being rude or demanding. He was just asking for what he needed. He needed some help, and he did not have the nuanced language that is culturally appropriate. And I knew that also at that moment, his second day in the United States was not really the time for a language lesson. But after a few weeks, he came back in my office and asked for something in a similar way, and we were able to laugh about it, and I was able to explain how that felt, as an American or native speaker, and how a better choice of words, could you please, would you mind, would be really helpful. So making those assumptions about intent leads to misunderstanding and creates so many barriers to positive interactions. So just stopping for a minute, checking in with yourself about what else is at play in that situation is really, really helpful. So that's really the number one thing I think about. But I also know some of you have already think about a lot of these things, but I thought some useful sort of ESL teacher tips to keep in mind, especially working with really beginning English learners or learners who are struggling with literacy issues might be helpful. The first thing, of course, is to be aware, of course, of the language that you are using during the interaction. Is it full of idiomatic expressions? Probably. We do that without even thinking, right? We say, oh, you don't have to worry about it. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Things got really out of hand last night. And when you're giving instructions or imparting some crucial information, and maybe if you have the luxury of planning ahead, take a minute to write down the simplest version in manageable bullet points and look out for all of those places where you might have made something more confusing than it needs to be, or use more words than are necessary, or use some of those expressions. So another tip, I think, is to get comfortable with a little bit of silence. When you ask a question, it may take the listener some time to process, understand the question, and formulate a response. There's a lot going on there. And wait, don't jump in right away trying to rephrase the question or repeating it immediately. We have this instinct to want to fill all of those awkward silences, but sometimes that silence is really necessary and ultimately helpful in the interaction. And I'm sure you've also had the experience of giving lots and lots of information to somebody, and you ask if they understand, and they say yes, yes, and then you find out later, oh no, they did not understand that at all. So one way to minimize that from happening is something we do called CCQ, which is concept check questions, to sort of go back and check understanding of information, and instead of just saying, do you understand? So those kind of questions are short, simple, yes or no questions, or a choice between two possibilities. For example, if you give the client a series of instructions and you say, you must return this form in person by Wednesday, you can ask, is it necessary to return it? Yes. Can you return it Thursday? No. Can you email it? No. Or ask them to repeat what you said rather than just saying, do you understand? So also, of course, it's really helpful to present things verbally and in writing and the use of visuals. With Google Images, you're only a click away from some help. Or using a calendar, drawing a timeline, as well as just saying something. And thinking about the printed materials that you provide, a lot of text, small text on a page is really overwhelming, and somebody might give up before even beginning to look at it. So breaking things down into much smaller chunks, thinking about the font that you're using. Is it a cursive font, a simple font, a larger font? Even if you have to use more paper, you might get better results. So thinking about also abbreviations. If you have a program that runs Monday to Thursday, and on your paper you write Mon-Thurs, they might not know you mean Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, right? So just sort of thinking about those things to keep in mind. And finally, this conference is looking at the question of how we can engage collaboratively with our new neighbors and promote an atmosphere of mutual understanding. And it seems to me that in the end, this really comes down to empathy, right? It seems really trite to say, but doing anything you can to remind yourself what that other person might be experiencing at that moment, or what you share in common. Saida and others talked this today about finding those places of commonality is really a crucial step in paving the way for collaborative work. And thinking about flexing that empathy muscle, I also think it's really important to regularly put yourself in difficult situations, like we did today with Josh's exercise, which I thought was really amazing. So you get that same feeling of not knowing how things work, right? I recently had the experience, it was some sort of tragic circumstances that one of our students' daughters had passed away, and she is Muslim, and I was asked to visit the apartment during the mourning or condolence period, and I wanted to be supportive, but I was really scared. I was really scared to go. I was scared of the unknown. I did not know the traditions. I did not know what to wear or what to bring or what not to bring or what to say or what not to say. And my heart was pounding as I'm standing outside the apartment thinking, oh, I have no idea what I'm walking into. But I was just so grateful for the honor to be there and to be included. And in the end, I knew it was just important as a mom and another person to go. And it's an experience I will not soon forget for what I learned, what those women taught me by bringing me into their space about their faith, and the power of the community of women and their traditions. And it was transformative to be outside of my comfort zone and experiencing things from the other side. Where I was the learner. So in the end, I encourage you to find those places. Maybe it's just going to a restaurant that only has a menu in Spanish, or taking a language class, or accepting that invitation that is really hard. It's a really great reminder. And I'm sorry, I think went over my 10 minutes.